making sure that we don't have a leak anywhere. I think we're good and tight. We don't have any air trying to get out of there, and we can sometimes miss a little bit of feel, but that gauge will keep us honest on that. We won't be having a problem there that we're not seeing. So now we have another item we can check off of our list here on our Stihl Engine Check. So we're down here to crankshaft in play is okay. Okay. Pressure test the carburetor. And now this right here is all going to be on our carburetor. All right, since we used our carburetor for a test device, we're going to have to retrieve it real fast so that we can use it. Set that out of the way, put our screws or nuts with that. We're just going to use this guy out of here. Now, most times whenever we are dealing with a carburetor, it's just about more beneficial to change it out. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a piece of bulk fuel line, push up on there, put the other end in our tester, and our pressure spec here, according to our sheet, is 0.8 bar. So look at that. I hope you can see that. So we're going to again inflate this air system right here to 0.8. Now, unlike our tanks, we're kind of back like we were in the beginning. It's not going to take much to get that pressure to 0.8 bar. So we're just going to poke on this real gentle, put up to 0.8 right there. Okay, we're going to test it. It seems to be holding really well. We're hanging out right there where we need to be. So, all right, we're hanging out there right where we need to be. So we're going to check this off as okay. Verify primer function. Now what we want to do now is go ahead and look at our throttle shaft to make sure that it is where it needs to be. So we'll remove that guy. And we want to check, now this is going to be our choke plate here. It's the first one we come to when this is the way the carburetor sets on the machine. So the first one you come to, the choke plate, the one around behind it is going to be our throttle shaft. So we're going to feel that thing, make sure it feels tight in every position, and it does. It feels great. No problems there. All right, and again, we verify primer function. 880 does not have one, so we'll just put NA, throttle shaft condition, okay. Condition of diaphragms. So let's look at our diaphragms here real fast. And to do that, we're just going to take a little screwdriver, peel this guy apart. And again, this is going to be our fuel pump side that we talked about earlier, that where trash can get built up in, that one time we saw. But what we're looking for here is a tear mostly. Tear is going to be our biggest concern right here, or one that is really stiff and not pliable. If it's gotten hardened, if the material in it has gotten hardened, then it's not going to flex well. So I'm going to hold my thumb down tight on that as I take the last screw loose so it doesn't deform that upper cap. It's just soft aluminum. And then we'll just pop this off of here. Well, look, okay, all that looks good. I don't see any problems there. We have little flaps in there. All that looks okay. Alrighty. I don't really see any problems there. The flaps all look good. So we'll just put that fella right back together. And sorry, it's most likely the other side going to be where the fuel pump diaphragm. This is their it pulls all the way through there. So let's just bolt this back together. I've not had one of these big Walbros apart before. This feels like more like it should be on a 5-horse Briggs or something. It's a monstrous thing. I'm trying to think. Well, those are just big old plates. I like 880s. They're pretty awesome. All right, let's pull this side off real quick. Take a peek at it. Take just a minute and spray some of this off of here. Don't want that dirt getting down in everything. Oh, yeah, at least it leaked on our paper, right? It should dry fine. Yeah, that looks better. Excited to get this thing back together. Yes, here's our fuel pump side. This is going to be our fuel pump diaphragm, and it should be going up and down. We just spray that. When I had that screw out, it put a little bit of gunk in there. There we go. Yeah, that looks really good. Now, what we're looking for is pliability. That looks good. I don't see any tears in there. So we're going to say that fella looks okay. You can kind of see there. Okay, our carburetor all looks good on our fuel pump side. All the little pieces on the other side look good. It pressure tested good. So we're going to call this okay. We're going to say we don't have a problem here. Now, let's go ahead and put this back together so that we don't get it contaminated. And while we're putting it back together, I want to kind of talk a little bit about our sheet. Now, I guess before we go any further, let's go ahead and make these notes. Condition, okay. Condition of fuel inlet screen, okay. All that's okay, good. Now, let's talk a little bit about our sheet so far. Now, the intake side of our piston is really the only problem we have on this side. And how do we know that real quick? Well, because we circled it. We can just glance through it really fast. Say, oh, problem right here. And again, I'm just starting these screws to where I can feel them start to touch, and then I'm stopping. I don't want to tighten them up. You always want to start them all before you go to snug anything down. It just makes it really difficult and can cross-thread something. So here we have just a gentle snug on all these. Again, we're not torquing a head gasket here. All we're doing is putting a screw into a little aluminum piece, so we're not getting crazy with it. Double check these since we had them apart, and then we'll know this carburetor is good. We'll get the surface junk off of it before we put it back together. Okay, now let's talk about this for a minute. Intake side of the piston, we're going to look at that a little closer when it comes off of there. Let's flip it. Oh my goodness, looks like that gasoline ate our clipboard, or not gasoline rather, but brake clean. Well, that is really handy. Okay, let's just remember what we had here. Gotta love it. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, here we are. Our other half stuck there with the brake clean. Don't get brake clean on a plastic clipboard. All right, so everything tested good down through here. Our first problem that we had here was right here. We have a couple things circled. So let's take a minute and again play detective. The only thing on the back was this. We're going to look at it when it comes apart. It's not really an issue right here because both of those parts, the piston and the cylinder, are in trouble on this side. So let's talk a little bit about this side for just a minute. And again, if nothing else had been circled, we'd want to look more at that. But we already know those parts are in trouble. And we're going to take note of that when we completely take it down. So let's look at different things here. I kind of like to get these into cause and effect. Okay, will this be a cause of a problem, or was this the effects of a problem that happened? So if we have a lot of aluminum on a muffler, did that cause a problem, or is that the result of there being a problem somewhere? We're going to mark that down as being a result. The piston condition, I didn't circle that, should have. The piston condition, it scored, tore all to pieces. That is the result of a problem. Spark plug, all of that was good, but it had a gray color. did the spark plug being gray cause something to have a problem, or was it a result of something? Well, I think it was the effect of that. Now, the only thing that we found so far that could be a problem, the thing that caused these things to happen, is a carburetor screw. Now, everything else we saw, everything was good. Everything pressure tested. The only thing that we didn't pressure test, let's back up and test this fuel line right here, because this technically could be an issue. Now that we have this scrap piece, I think we can test this guy. Yeah, I believe we can. So let's plug out, because I want to make sure we remove any bit of doubt of anything. All right, so here is our fuel line. So it should hold, and it does. So that is the only questionable piece that we didn't have a good way to test when we did our sheet, and it is holding pressure and vacuum. Now, was that 0.8? Let me see what our tank was supposed to be tested to. Pressure test fuel line 0.8. Let's go to 0.8. There we go. Holding great. Now let's do pressure to 0.8. Holding perfectly. So now we have absolutely ruled out even the fuel. Excuse me. We've absolutely ruled out even our fuel line there. So our fuel line tested okay all the way through there. So our tank and our fuel line, everything there was testing okay. Now, so we have 4 things here circled. All of these right here are the result of some other problem, which I feel we can narrow down to this carburetor screw being set incorrectly. So now we're going to be able to look at this and say without any doubt to the customer, if this was a customer to us, since it's our machine, that carburetor screw somehow wasn't where it was supposed to be. And that carburetor screw not being where it was supposed to be is getting ready to cost an enormous pile of money. So I guess this would be a really good lesson for folks that don't have to learn it themselves of, be sure you're not just playing with carburetor screws if you don't know what's going on. And I don't know what happened here. Somebody could have been fooling around with it, could have vibrated. I really don't know. It was a complete surprise to me when it quit running. So one of our students was operating it, cutting a big old piece of a cookie off of a monstrous big old stump with it out there on the lot, and it just quit, and it never would start back. And we fought and tried to get it, and decided, you know what, this will make a good Stihl Engine Check video. So here we are. So the point of all this right here is these are the things that we're going to see as our indicators to that being the problem. Now, if we'd have had a leaking crankcase, or if we'd have had a fuel line leaking, we could have attributed it to one of those things, but we got rid of all of those problems. Only thing left it could be was that carburetor being out of adjustment. So it's very, very important that we take note of those things and make sure those things are adjusted correctly. All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing ready to put away. And again, I want to get this cylinder off of here because we want to look at that intake side of the piston. And it all has to come off anyway, so we're going to go ahead and do that and get our parts ordered up and have everything ready to go when we get back there next week, so that we can get this thing rolling. Now we're going to take this guy out because this goes back in our toolbox. We want to leave it in the old cylinder. It's getting ready to be put on the shelf of stories. The way that goes. Let's put that little fella up so he doesn't get lost. Now let's go ahead and remove, actually before we pull those cylinder bolts, we need to get our muffler off, so let's do that real quickly. And again, we have on our list, we're going to order 2 of these little screws here and a fuel line, if I remember correctly. Yes, fuel line and 2 of these screws. in addition to the rest of the parts. Now, when we look through here, do we need crankcase seals? No, we're not going to disturb it. Now, if we were going to pull the crankshaft out for any reason, we would put new crankshaft seals in it. This saw, sadly, has only had probably 10 tanks of gas run through it. It hasn't been. This, honestly, in our area is more of a novelty thing than a necessary thing. We can get by with what we need on those 4 series, 5 series, 6 series saws. But again, I bought this saw so that so we can have the whole end from one to the other on the lineup of equipment here, not only to run but to work on. So that's it's not one of those things where we have to have it, but we do have a project that we're going to be really interested in coming up soon to use it for, and I want to get it going so we can do that. All right, so we're going to try to see if this screwdriver will fit on you. So we're just going to loosen this. I'm not going to take it all the way off if I can help from it. Yeah, that looks good. All right, now we've got 4 screws here to remove our cylinder. It was tight. 1. That's what I love about these pro saws over the occasional use type saw is we're tearing them down to get to an engine is or a piston or a cylinder is very, very simple. Now, this video is I'm kind of trying to keep track of how long it's getting. It's pretty long, and it really doesn't take this long to do a Stihl engine check. I'm spending a lot of time showing you the different things and talking about stuff, and that's really adding to the time. The Stihl engine check itself shouldn't take too awfully long to do. Some of the newer saws that are a little more complicated, they'll take a little longer. These saws like this, they're not that bad. They shouldn't take forever to do. Just want to ease that boot out of the way. So now we're going to pull this jug or cylinder up off of the piston, and I'm going to stick my fingers in here and hold it so it doesn't bang around, and we'll take a look-see here. And I'm going to lay that cylinder down for just a moment and grab my little block of wood because I really want to tear everything all to pieces here. If that piston goes and beats around on this surface, it can scratch it. So we're going to put our little piston holder tool right there, and we'll look at things. Now look, now this side the rings are not stuck. This side they are. Kind of see here how they've just been washed to no end. Now let's look at the intake side of our piston. It doesn't look bad, does it? There's a little bit of rubbing right there, but it's really just wet. So let's just spray it off there real quick. Yeah, see a little bit of rubbing there, probably because the other side was getting so big. But so we have our intake side here. Looks rough. I mean, our exhaust side looks really rough. It's very scratched and pitted, and the rings are, you can't really differentiate what's what there because they're so stuck, but and wiped across. But this is very very telling. Now we're looking at this and we see intake side good, exhaust side bad, and we'll take this information now and let me just show you something really neat. Here. All right, so now we're ready to kind of let the story be told. If we have this lean combustion, can be caused by many things. Now we've talked about that. We have our screw that wasn't right, air leaks. Here is the intake side of our piston. We notice our rings are still loose. Those rings are loose. Let's look at our exhaust side of our piston. We see it scratched all to pieces. So what we have here is a very frustrating situation. We have a little problem of too lean end up destroying our engine. So when we see this just on this one side, are we able now to see what could cause this. So let's just read this. It says, when an engine is running lean, less fuel is coming in the combustion chamber to vaporize and extract the heat. And what fuel is present will burn extremely fast. If conditions are right, detonation may occur, which will be evidenced on the exhaust side of the piston by pitted, eroded areas while the piston is actually burned away. Now, we didn't have a ton of that. We were probably in the beginning sides of that. When you see detonation burning of the piston, it is most likely caused by lean running. The fuel filter or tank vent may be restricted. Again, we tested those, we're in good shape. Or there may be an air leak in the crankcase. Again, not necessarily the problem we had. In some cases, it may be to how the unit was operated. I guess we have to say that because it would be operated with the screw in wrong. So let's just, I guess we'll call it that. A chainsaw being constantly operated at part throttle RPM may run lean and hot, and in some cases fail, even though there is no actual fault with the unit. So we didn't see a fault anywhere except for a high screw. Typically, lean running damage will be concentrated on the exhaust side of the piston. There may be some scoring on the intake side if the unit is run long enough for damage on the exhaust side to push the piston back against the intake side of the cylinder. It says here a Stihl engine check should identify some sort of lean fault, which would be confirmation of why the piston is damaged. So I feel like we have done due diligence on this. We have gone through, we have identified these pictures here. We see a very similar picture painted on our piston and on our exhaust side and our intake side, as well as when we did our engine check, we did find an issue with our air situation of being our screw turned in wrong. So we're not going to have, it's not going to be sending enough fuel with the air that's going by. So we have too much heat. You know, that fuel pulls the heat away as it's touches it. I don't know if you've ever been to a place, State Fair comes to mind, where they have this big fan set up that spray mist in front of them. When it hits you, it's super cool because that moisture hitting you and then the air going across it just wicks the heat right off of you. Same thing on this piston. When that fuel air charge comes through that carburetor and comes up through the transfer ports and hits this piston, it is cooling it down very quickly. And when we don't have enough fuel, it can't cool it down quick enough. And here's what we have. All right, just a quick shot of our cylinder here. There's our exhaust side all scratched up. There's our intake side. Not looking horrible. If the whole cylinder looked like that, it'd probably run just fine. But when we get over here, I don't know if you can hear that. Hear those scratches in it. My fingernail falls in the grooves. All right, so we'll get us some parts ready to put back in that thing, and we'll bring you along for that ride as well.